The town of Black Hollow had always been a place of whispers and shadows, nestled at the edge of the ancient and foreboding Crimsonwood Forest. Locals called it the Lost Woods, a place where even the bravest hunters dared not venture. For centuries it had been the subject of ominous tales, stories of people who entered the forest and were never seen again. The forest was said to be cursed, a place where the line between the living and the dead blurred into a malevolent haze.
Harper Graves, a journalist from the city, arrived in Black Hollow with a mind full of skepticism and a heart hardened by years of chasing down sensational stories. She had heard the tales of the Crimsonwood Forest and, like any good journalist, she was drawn to the mystery, eager to uncover the truth behind the superstition. She was determined to be the one who returned from the forest, to break the curse and reveal the reality behind the folklore. The townspeople warned her, old men with weathered faces, women who clutched their rosaries tight, children who stared at her with wide, fearful eyes. They all told her the same thing. No one who enters the forest comes back. But Harper was undeterred. She saw their fear as ignorance, a relic of an older, less enlightened time. She had survived the war zones of distant countries and the dark alleys of her city. What could a forest do to her? On the morning she was set to venture into the Crimsonwood, the air was thick with the scent of pine and decay. The sky above was a murky grey, a curtain of clouds blotting out the sun. Harper packed her equipment, camera, recorder, notebook, and set off, the villagers watching her with a mix of dread and resignation. No one offered to go with her. No one even wished her luck. They simply watched, as they had done so many times before. The forest swallowed her whole. The deeper Harper ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees, gnarled and ancient, seemed to lean in towards her, their branches clawing at the sky. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of an unseen bird. She marked her path carefully, leaving ribbons of bright fabric tied to the trees as she went, ensuring she would find her way back. Hours passed and the forest grew darker. The canopy above was so dense that it blocked out what little light filtered through the clouds. Harper felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. It was as if the very air around her was alive, watching her, waiting. Then she found the first of them. It was a shoe, half buried in the undergrowth, worn and cracked with age. Harper's heart skipped a beat as she crouched to examine it. Nearby she found the remnants of a coat, its fabric torn and rotting. The bones came next, scattered, white and brittle, barely recognizable as human. Panic flickered at the edge of her mind, but she pushed it down. These were just the remains of the unfortunate, lost and forgotten. They proved nothing supernatural, but the forest had other plans. The trees began to close in, their roots writhing and twisting beneath the soil, as if alive. The ribbons she had tied to mark her path were gone, vanished as if they had never been. Harper's confidence faltered. She retraced her steps, or tried to, but every direction led her deeper into the maze of trees. The forest seemed to shift around her, paths appearing and disappearing like mirages. Night fell swiftly, and with it came the darkness. Not just the absence of light, but a palpable, living darkness that crept into Harper's mind, filling it with thoughts of despair and hopelessness. She could feel eyes on her, 1,000 invisible gazes watching her every move. The whispers began, soft at first like the wind through the leaves, but soon they grew louder, closer, until they were all she could hear. "Turn back. You don't belong here. They're coming for you." Harper spun around, her flashlight beam cutting through the dark, but there was nothing there. She was alone, completely, utterly alone. The forest was playing tricks on her mind, she told herself, just her imagination running wild. But the whispers persisted, now joined by the faint sound of footsteps just beyond the edge of her vision. In a panic, Harper ran. She stumbled through the underbrush, branches tearing at her clothes, roots tripping her. But she didn't stop. She had to get out, had to find her way back to the village, back to safety. But the forest was endless, stretching on forever in every direction. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, mingling with the sound of her own ragged breathing and the pounding of her heart. And then, just as she was about to collapse from exhaustion, she saw it, a faint light through the trees. Hope surged within her as she pushed towards it, the last of her strength driving her forward. She burst through the undergrowth and into a small clearing, but what she found there stopped her dead in her tracks. It was not the village, it was not safety. The clearing was filled with people, dozens of them, standing perfectly still, their faces blank and eyes hollow. They were the lost, the ones who had never returned. Their bodies were gaunt, their skin pale as the moonlight that filtered through the trees. They stared at her, unblinking, as if waiting for something. Harper backed away, her breath catching in her throat. But as she turned to run, the clearing shifted, the trees closing in around her, trapping her in the circle of the dead. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices screaming in her mind. And then she understood. The forest did not take them. They were the forest. Every soul that had entered Crimsonwood, every person who had vanished, had become part of the curse, absorbed into the trees, their spirits doomed to wander the woods forever. As the darkness closed in, Harper's last thought was not of escape, but of surrender. The lost woods had claimed another soul. When the townspeople awoke the next morning, they knew without asking that Harper Graves would not be returning. The forest was quiet, as it always was, after it had claimed someone new. Life in Black Hollow went on, as it had for centuries, with the unspoken understanding that some mysteries were not meant to be solved. The Crimsonwood Forest stood, as it always had, ancient and unyielding, its secrets buried deep within its twisted heart. And the town knew, as they always had, that those who entered the lost woods would never return.